The movie begins 4 hours before Beckett's execution. A guard knocks on his cell door and tells him to get up. Beckett opens his eyes and is told he has a visitor. A priest named Father James Morris comes in and asks how he is doing. Beckett thanks him, but says he is fine. The priest finds that hard to believe, saying most people in his position feel very differently. Beckett just smiles and says most people don't have his clarity. When the father points out that this may be his last chance to talk to anyone, Beckett tells him the real story is far more interesting than whatever he has heard. He does warn him, though it's a tragedy, and it doesn't even begin with him. His mother came from a wealthy family in Huntington, Long Island, with a fortune worth around 18 to 19 billion. Beckett is quick to point out that money does buy happiness, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong. His mother was young and carefree when she met his father, but things went south fast. She fell pregnant at 18, and her family gave her a simple choice: get rid of the baby or leave. She chose to leave. His father came to see him only once after he was born, and the sight of the baby was apparently enough to give the man a heart attack right there at the hospital. His mother was left on her own just to get by, but she made sure Beckett knew one important thing. Being thrown out of the family did not mean losing the money. The entire fortune would pass down the family line no matter what. And since Beckett was the youngest, all he had to do was wait. Despite growing up with little money, his mother made sure Beckett carried himself well. It was around this time that he first met Julia Steinway at a party and was immediately drawn to her. Their first conversation was a little awkward. He told her he lived in Belleville, but wouldn't be there forever, casually mentioning he was set to inherit a lot of money someday. Julia smiled and asked if he was trying to impress her, then told him it was okay if he was. Meanwhile, his mother's health quietly got worse, and by the time the doctors noticed, it was too late. The Redfellow family, who could have easily helped, did nothing. She passed away shortly after, and her dying wish to be buried at the Redfellow family plot in Huntington was ignored. She ended up in a small cemetery off the highway in East Orange. Standing at her grave, Beckett made up his mind to go to the Redfellow family and take what was his. But life moved on. He spent time in the foster care system, lost contact with Julia, and years later found himself in a regular office job, wearing a suit every day. He kept an eye on the Redfellow family from a distance, but none of them were showing any signs of going anywhere. He had almost accepted that he might never see a single dollar of that money. Then out of nowhere, he bumped into Julia Steinway again. They caught up briefly, laughing and talking like old times. Beckett suggested grabbing a drink sometime, but the timing wasn't right as she was already engaged. As she walked away, she turned back and asked whatever happened to the Redfellow family fortune. Beckett told her he would inherit it someday. She laughed and said, "Call me when you've killed them all," and left the shop. That night, after hearing this, 7 Redfellows were still out there living their lives while his mother was in the ground. And Beckett lives in a small apartment. Beckett started thinking about the thing he told himself he would never do. His first target was Taylor Exeter Redfellow, a broker at the family's finance firm. Taylor wasn't hard to find at all. Beckett had no real plan and kept telling himself he wasn't the type of person who could actually go through with something like this. But then he lost his job, handed straight to the boss's 19-year-old son just because of his last name, and something in Beckett broke. One day, Beckett follows Taylor to his private yacht, finds him alone, ties his leg to the anchor, and drops it into the ocean. He even showed up to the funeral and introduced himself to his uncle Warren Redfellow as Mary's son. Warren was shaken and guilty, putting Taylor's death down to his bad habits and never once suspecting Beckett. He told Beckett he should have been there for him and his mother years ago and that he was truly sorry. Out of guilt, Warren offered Beckett Taylor's old job at the firm. Beckett hadn't seen this coming, but he needed the money, and being inside the family was exactly where he needed to be. Within days, he was sitting in the office picking up everything he could, learning how the wealthy think, how deals are made, how money is kept, knowing that if things went the way he planned, he'd be managing his own fortune before long. Then suddenly one day, Julia calls Beckett. She is married now and just back from her honeymoon. She brought up the time he asked her out in a shop and told him he was welcome to try again sometime. But when Beckett asked her out again, she pointed out she was married and hung up the phone. Beckett looked around the office and asked himself quietly, who's next? His next target was Noah Redfellow, a self-proclaimed artist who spent his days blogging and talking about art. Beckett tracked him down at one of his art shows and casually introduced himself as a possible cousin. Noah bought it straight away and took him back to his place where he introduced him to his girlfriend, Ruth. She was warm and easy to talk to, and Beckett and Ruth quickly found they had a lot in common. Noah got bored of the conversation and wandered off. Before Beckett left, Ruth invited him to dinner on Thursday, and he agreed. But Beckett already had a plan forming in his head. He figured out that mixing certain chemicals with photographic developing solution would essentially make an explosive. It would look like Noah had accidentally mixed the wrong cleaning products. Nobody would question it. At the dinner, things got a little complicated. Ruth was funny, sharp, and easy to talk to, and Beckett found himself genuinely enjoying her company. But he had to stay focused. He even bought flowers on the way. When the moment came, the plan worked. Noah was gone. Shortly after, 2 FBI agents showed up at Beckett and asked if he was an heir to the Redfellow estate. Beckett stayed calm and told them no, that his mother had grown up a Redfellow, but the family had a falling out. He said if he were set to inherit $10 billion, he would certainly be living differently. The agents explained that when 2 family members die in a row, they follow certain protocols. Beckett nodded and showed nothing. A few days later, Julia walked into his office asking for a loan, though it was clearly just an excuse to see him. The conversation was playful as always. As she was leaving, she mentioned Taylor and Noah, wondering out loud who might be next. She told Beckett she would expect to hear from him soon and smiled, saying she was sure he would make a killing. His next target was Stephen Redfellow, who had been charged in 2 countries for money laundering. Beckett figured not many people would lose sleep over this one. He found out that certain ingredients in gym supplements taken in large enough amounts could cause a massive heart attack, and made sure Stephen got exactly that. The church where Stephen had connections wanted no investigation, and the whole thing was quietly closed. He had a good job, and things with Ruth were beginning to feel real. On one of their walks, she told him she had been planning to break up with Noah before he died, and that she knew she should feel devastated, but didn't. Beckett told her that just meant she was being honest. She smiled and asked if he wanted to grab dinner that week. He said yes. Meanwhile, that night, Julia showed up at his apartment unannounced, having taken a key earlier without him noticing. She told him to stop ignoring her and opened up about her husband lying to her for years and leaving them broke. Things got uncomfortable when Ruth showed up at the door. Beckett quickly got Julia to leave and stepped outside with Ruth, suggesting they go out to eat instead. She agreed. Over dinner, Ruth talked about her students, saying they all wanted to be millionaires, but none wanted to actually work for it. She then asked Beckett what he would do with $1 billion. He smiled and said he would take her to a better restaurant. She opened up about how fashion had been her lifelong dream, but she had slowly realized she never really liked it. She said it was scary to dream small because nobody ever teaches you how. Beckett sat there listening and for a moment thought about stopping everything. He had a good job and something real with Ruth, but he couldn't quit now. And Julia was calling again, leaving messages telling him he shouldn't ignore her much longer or something bad might happen. By this point, the Redfellow family had started to notice something wasn't right. His Aunt Cassandra had laser security systems installed across all 4 of her houses, but there was no security at the day spa she visited every Tuesday. Beckett walked and dressed as a staff member and offered her a complimentary teeth whitening treatment. The chemical he used was so close to a normal whitening agent that police assumed she had bought a bad batch abroad. Case closed. Then there was Uncle MacArthur, a man who owned half a National Air and Space Museum and was planning a personal trip to the moon while his employees couldn't afford health insurance. All it took was a laminated pass and a shirt from the mall to get close enough. With MacArthur gone, things were going well for Beckett. He had a good apartment and was moving in with Ruth. The next red fellow in line was his Uncle Warren, but Beckett couldn't bring himself to go after the man who had given him a chance. He told himself it was probably over anyway. Then the FBI came back. This time, they had done their research and informed Beckett that he was in fact an heir to the Redfellow estate. He played it cool and showed them he was at a hot dog store on the date they asked about. Not long after, while walking alongside his Uncle Warren, the old man suddenly collapsed from a heart attack and was rushed to hospital. He didn't make it. Beckett realized there was now only one red fellow left. Then, out of nowhere, an invitation arrived from his grandfather, asking him to come to the estate that very night. Beckett called Ruth and told her he would make it back in time for their engagement party. Then, Julia showed up with photographs she had collected herself. She had figured out that Taylor couldn't have simply drowned given that he had gone to Princeton on a swimming scholarship. She demanded $300,000 by 5 o'clock, threatening to send everything to Ruth if he didn't pay up. Beckett had no choice but to get the money to her husband in Hoboken. He was furious but completely cornered. Meanwhile, at the estate, his grandfather welcomed him over dinner, and the two had an honest conversation. The old man talked about ambition and conscience, saying the only thing that truly hurts a person is the voice in their head telling them right from wrong. He said, if you turn your head just right into the wind, that voice fades to a whisper, and after a while, you might not hear it at all. He then led Beckett to a room filled with old weapons and handed him a gun. What followed was a struggle, and Beckett fought back in self-defense. His grandfather was gone. Beckett told the sheriff's department exactly that. It was self-defense. Meanwhile, he was late to his own engagement party by over an hour. Ruth could tell something was wrong and demanded the truth. Beckett told her only what she would see on the news. His grandfather was dead. As for the fortune, it was now his. He finally had the life his mother had always wanted for him. He was rich, engaged, and everything seemed to be falling into place. But then, right in the middle of his engagement, an FBI agent walked through the door and arrested him for murder. Not for any of the Red Fellows. For Lyle Archdale, Julia's husband. Beckett couldn't believe it. After everything he had gotten away with, he was going down for a killing he didn't even commit. The evidence was damning. Security footage, an eyewitness, and his fingerprints on the murder weapon, a letter opener. Julia took the stand and told the court Beckett had been in love with her his entire life. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Then Julia came to visit him in prison. She told him that when she found her husband's body, she had also found a note written in Lyle's own handwriting. She would only release it if Beckett signed the entire fortune over to her. He had less than 24 hours to live, and she was his only hope, and that's why he had been so calm all morning. He was waiting for Julia to come through. But as the hours passed, she still hadn't shown up. Then at the last moment, a new piece of evidence comes to light, proving that Beckett didn't commit the murder. He is released. Outside the prison, Ruth is waiting. She hands him back the gift he had once given her and walks away without a word. Beckett notices Julia watching from the parking area and walks over to her. He gets in her car and they leave for the estate. Movie ends.